Hey guys, Alex here from the DMs Club on the Titan Bear Gaming YouTube channel. I'm continuing to take you through Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and today I'm focusing on the new Cleric Archetypes that you can use for character creation. So let's take a look at it. If you're following along, this is on page 17 of Xanathar's Guide. That's where the Cleric section begins. And just like any of the other classes, the section begins by talking about role-playing aspect, new details that you can think about when you're making your Cleric, what kinds of things would be in your Cleric's backstory that helps you bring a degree of realism to your character at the gaming table. It first talks about the temple, what kind of temple you might have come from, what are some of the details of that temple. One that I particularly like for this one is option 6 on their suggested table that says your temple might have been in the outer planes, which is kind of an interesting option. It also talks about a possible keepsake that you might have as a cleric, and this could be something that has religious significance, or it could just be something that has personal significance. It's some kind of little trophy or some kind of little heirloom that you keep on your person at all times, something that has meaning to you, something that you treasure as an individual. Then it also talks about options for having a secret. This one's kind of funky. This one's talking about some kind of dark desire or a hidden force that you contend with, or a doubt that you may have in your faith. Take a look at the section. They talk about some interesting things, whether there's an imp that's coming to talk to you regularly and you don't necessarily trust them, or maybe you distrust the gods that you serve. You serve them, but you may not wholly trust that they have your best interests at heart, or something like this, right? It's an interesting thing that helps add a little bit degree of additional depth or another dimension to your character's backstory, and just how your character perceives their own faith. Now, the two new archetypes that you get for Cleric are the Forge Domain and the Grave Domain, and I actually really like both of them. I think they're both really strong offerings here in Xanathar's. I think people will like these. Let's take a look at the Forge Domain first. The Forge Domain basically centers on being a crafter, or making use of the forge, or being a blacksmith. Like all of the Cleric Domains, you do get some extra spells that are going to be permanently prepared on your Cleric spell list, and they're all related to some kind of thing about items or materials that go for items, or crafting, or something of that ilk. You get Identify as a first level cleric, Heat Metal as a third level cleric, Elemental Weapon, Fabricate when you get up to 7th level, Animate Objects for 9th level. These are cool. These are nice things that you wouldn't otherwise have access to in the normal cleric spell list. So I kind of like that these things then get brought in as an addition for if you're going to be the Forge Domain cleric. You get bonus proficiencies. You get your Smith's tools, which you would anticipate in heavy armor. You get Blessing of the Forge as your first level power. This one's really cool. This one's really nice. This one basically says that you get to, at the end of a long rest, touch one non-magical object that is a suit of armor or is a weapon, and until the end of your next long rest, that object becomes a magic item. If it's an armor, it gets +1 AC. If it's a weapon, it gets +1 bonus to attack and damage. This means that you get to start the game with a magic weapon or magic armor. This is actually really nice. I like this one a lot. Now, you might be thinking that because it only applies to non-magical objects, that as this scales up to later game, people in your party are going to start having magic items and starting to have magic weapons or magic armor, and that this might start to peter off. But because you can only attune to 3 magic items per character anyway, and yes, there are some items that don't require attunement, you're always going to find some use for this. So I think this is always going to have some kind of benefit to your party. Being able to just make a magic item in the party is a really valuable thing. And what's more is you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, but it means you could change it out each day if you want. So when you're in these early levels, you have the option of channeling some additional armor class that day, or having some additional weapon proficiency, depending on what kind of vulnerabilities or what kind of things you'd like to be strong with for your character. At 2nd level, you get a new option for Channel Divinity. This one's called Artisan's Blessing. This one's cool. This one's not a combat-related effect. I kind of like the way that this one works. But basically the way that it goes is you use Channel Divinity to create simple items. You conduct an hour-long ritual that crafts a non-magical item that has to include some metal. A weapon, a suit of armor, 10 pieces of ammo, a set of tools, another metal object. The creation is completed at the end of the hour, coalescing in an unoccupied space of your choice on a surface within 5 feet of you. This is really neat. You basically sit down and pray, and then you manifest an object into existence. You're not forging it, you're not hitting it with a hammer, you're not actually crafting the thing. You're basically blessing the thing into existence, which is kind of a neat effect. It's kind of a cool way to help make stuff when you may be out of town, or maybe you're on the road, or something like that. There's a limit to the value of the thing that you can make, and to maybe the level of complexity to the thing that you're making. It can't be worth more than 100 gold pieces. And as a part of the ritual, you have to lay out enough metal, and that could include coins, to be worth 100 gold pieces, so that you're basically transmuting the metal, the raw metal, into whatever the final product is that you're going to be making. You can create a duplicate of a non-magical item that contains metal, such as a key, if you possess the original during the ritual. This gives you a lot of options. I think this one's actually a really interesting power. I think people are going to find cool ways to make some use out of this thing. And it's nice to have it as a secondary use for channel divinity, so that if you're not fighting undead, then you have the ability to actually get some use out of your channel divinity anyway. At 6th level, you get Soul of the Forge, which gives you a couple of passive things. You get resistance to fire damage, and you get, while wearing heavy armor, you gain a +1 bonus to AC, so you're going to be naturally a little bit more defensive, which is cool. It helps channel that tanky, smith-oriented character, so it's kind of nice. At 8th level, you get Divine Strike, which is the same kind of thing that we've been seeing for some of the other archetypes as well, which is when you attack on your turn, once per turn, you do additional damage on the first strike. So it's just passive damage. This one here is 1d8 fire damage when you pick this up at 8th level, and it grows at 14th level up to 2d8 fire damage as well. It's basically the same thing as all these other ones. Some additional passive damage that only happens once per turn, and the only criteria for making it happen is just that you hit with a weapon attack. So that's a nice passive thing that's going to help increase your combat efficiency on this character. At 17th level, the bonus that you got from the Soul of the Forge gets boosted up. This one's called Saint of Forge and Fire. You can now gain immunity to fire damage, and while wearing heavy armor, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. It's okay. It's not terribly overwhelming for a 17th level thing, but the other stuff that you get for being a Forge Domain Cleric, I think helps outweigh that. Being able to start the game with a magical item really early and always guarantee that you're wearing at least one magical item, or that at least one of your non-magical items is instead magical throughout the course of the game is big. That's always going to have some value to you and the rest of your party. Being able to do your Artisan's Blessing, to be able to create things, is always going to come in handy. Having the Soul of the Forge for +1 bonus to AC, and always doing additional damage on Divine Strike, is always going to be valuable. I think this is a pretty strong additional domain option that I think clerics are going to like having at their disposal. We also have the Grave Domain as the second domain. This one is thematically clerics that are watching over the boundary between life and death. This is a very common theme that's been showing up in recent popularity thanks to the Critical Role Twitch show, with Vaxildan's character being a servant of the Raven Queen who oversees this transition between life and death. Basically, what that boils down to from a thematic element is things that are alive should be alive, and things that are dead should be dead. Things that shouldn't be coming back, things shouldn't be turned into undeath, that when you die, you have a time and place for when that death is supposed to happen, things like this. It's an interesting thematic element. People are liking it, and I like the details that the Grave Domain provides. This is actually a really powerful archetype, possibly too powerful, but you guys can be the judge for that. You get new spells for being part of the Grave Domain. You get, and everything here is kind of centered around the concept of temporary hit points, or bringing things back to life, or applying necrotic effects, or something like that. So you get kind of a necro idea for your cleric on this one. Bane, Ray of Enfeeblement, Gentle Repose, Vampiric Touch, Revivify becomes a regular, a permanently prepared spell for you. Blight, Death Ward. See, it's all kind of got the same thematic element. At first level, you get the power Circle of Mortality. This guy's huge. This guy is character defining in terms of powers that you could possibly get from a domain as your cleric. At first level, you get the ability to manipulate the line between life and death. When you would normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points with a spell, i.e. when you cast a healing spell towards somebody who is at 0 hit points, if someone has already dropped to 0 hit points, they're incapacitated and they're making death saves, instead of rolling the dice, you just automatically get to grant them the highest value possible for the dice that you would have rolled. This is huge. This means that when someone's gone down to 0, any individual spell that you're throwing their way is going to have the maximum effect of the healing dice. That's huge. It's a big deal. You're going to be generating a lot of hit points when people are on the ground. Further, if that wasn't good enough, you learn Spare the Dying as a cantrip that doesn't count against the number of cantrips that you know. You can use it as a bonus action instead of as a regular action. Wow, that's a win. And it no longer has a range of touch. It now has a range of 30 feet. Which means if you've got a Grave Domain Cleric in your party, that Cleric can be casting offensive spells, that Cleric can be attacking with a melee weapon, and if somebody goes down, they can use Spare the Dying as a bonus action from 30 feet away, and that person remember the effects of Spare the Dying is that anybody who is incapacitated and is making death saves stays at 0 hit points, but is stabilized. They no longer have to be making death saves. So as a bonus action, yep, you are now saved from having to make death saves. You no longer have to do those. Oh, and on the next turn when I'm going to cast a healing spell on you, it's maximum hit points recovery anyway. This Circle of Mortality spell is a huge deal. This thing is a massive, massive power up for anybody playing a cleric. I think this by itself is going to draw a lot of people to want to play this domain on their own. You also get Eyes of the Grave at first level, which is something that's interesting. It's similar to the Detect Evil and Detect Good that you get as a paladin, where you get to, for a short span, know the location of undead within 60 feet of you. Nice little role play thing, a little bit of radar, undead radar. You get a new thing for Channel Divinity, which is called Path to the Grave. This one is another offensive Channel Divinity. This one, I love the verbiage that they use here. You can use your Channel Divinity to mark another creature's life force for termination. Basically, the way that it goes is, as an action, you choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of you, cursing it until the end of your next turn. The next time you or an ally hits that cursed creature with an attack, the creature has vulnerability to all of that attack's damage. Then the curse ends. This is really big. Because it does take an action for you, most likely the person that's going to be getting the benefit of this curse is going to be your friend that then makes the next attack. So you have kind of this nice teeing up or assist effect for it. Or if you can use this to have a bonus action cantrip, then you can take advantage of it. But you do this, and the next attack that the target suffers from they have vulnerability to that. It's double damage from that attack. That's big. That can be a lot of damage that goes out. That can be a really impactful thing. At 6th level, you get Sentinel at Death's Door. As a reaction, any creature that's within 30 feet of you that you can see, when they suffer a critical hit, you can spend your reaction to turn that critical hit into a regular hit. Now, this is really powerful because you can use this feature a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, and it recovers every time you do a long rest. So every day, you're going to be converting 3, 4, maybe 5 critical hits that your party would take into regular hits. That can be a huge amount of passive damage reduction. At 8th level, you get Potent Spellcasting, which is a fairly typical one. You can add your Wisdom modifier to any damage that you deal with a cantrip. There's a lot of other spellcasting classes that get this, but it's nice that they get this as well, especially when you're going to pair that up with Path to the Grave, where if you're going to use your action to curse the creature to take damage vulnerability to the next attack, and then you do a cantrip for your bonus action on that turn, that can be really helpful. You can do a lot of damage with that. Now at 17th level, you get Keeper of Souls, which is an interesting one. This one gives you the ability that whenever an enemy that you can see dies within 60 feet of you, you or a target of your choice gets to regenerate some hit points equal to the number of hit dice that enemy, the fallen enemy, had. Now the number of hit dice for an enemy is an interesting mechanic that we haven't really used too much in 5th edition. Every monster and every villain does have a number of hit dice specified in their NPC stat block, and it usually ranges from anywhere from 3 hit dice to 12 hit dice to 20 hit dice for some of the biggest ones. And so you're not going to be generating a lot of hit points from this, but here's the kicker. You can use this every round. You can't use it again until you start your next turn. So you can be generating a lot of passive hit points off of this if a lot of creatures are dying around you over the course of a combat. This is a pretty big one. Couple this with Circle of Mortality, that you get maximum healing off of casting a healing spell at somebody with 0 hit points, as well as being able to do Spare the Dying as a bonus action from 30 feet. There's a lot to like here in the Grave Domain Cleric. I think that you're going to be finding a lot of players are picking up the Grave Domain Cleric simply because these powers are just so good. But I also think that the thematic element is a nice one. I can see making the religious space that this character is going to be occupying, this grave, the proper border between life and death, could be a nice one that can be very prevalent over the course of a campaign world. I can see DMs building a lot of their world around this concept and making this one of the dominant religions in the game. So those are the two archetypes. Those are the two new domains for clerics. I like them both. I think that I like them both a lot because not only are the powers good, but they're also very different from one another. And I think that they channel their thematic element very nicely into the power set that they get. I think that Wizards has done a good job with this one. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think about these, or if you're already using them, what kind of experiences you guys have had. Leave me a comment. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm going to keep going through the different classes here. So I'm going to do one video each for all the classes, so look forward to those. You can also come find me over on social media. I'm at Titan Bear Gaming on basically all social media platforms, and I'd love to talk to you over there. I think that about does it. Until next time I see you, have more fun, would ya? It's good for you.